So I am going to start with Michael West, and I'm going to start with his version on self-compassion, because this is a key part of Overwhelm, isn't it? You know, really learning what self-compassion is, because if you don't look after yourself, first and foremost, how on earth can you look after other people within your team? So I'm going to run through this with you. So first of all, you can see I've got 4 dimensions, and this is key to Michael West compassionate leadership, and it's attending, understanding, empathizing, and helping. So the first one is attending. So we're talking specifically about self-compassion. So when you're thinking about yourself, how do you listen and notice what is happening within yourself and within your mind? You know, what are you listening for? And these are things like the warning signs sometimes. You know, I like to think of it as a dashboard on a car, and sometimes a warning light comes on, an amber warning light comes on. So really thinking about how do you actually consciously or bring it into your consciousness, the warning signs that would tell you that there is perhaps something wrong. And it's things like perhaps you're not sleeping properly. You've noticed that you're eating perhaps things that you wouldn't normally eat, perhaps using alcohol as a way of supporting or getting you to go to sleep because you're not sleeping. It could be that you're getting a little bit irritable or perhaps a little bit anxious. So it's really bringing that into the consciousness way before it gets out of hand. So this is a really important part of self-compassion. The next one is understanding. So how do I understand and navigate through the challenges I face? You know, what are the ways that you could start to think about, okay, if I've got those challenges, how do I actually make sense of them? Meeting those challenges where they are at, what would you do and what would that look like? And again, will be a self-reflective exercise. You're maybe not going to have all the answers today, but it's a really good starting point. The next one is so important. It's how do I empathize myself? How many people do I know that actually have a voice inside their head that talks negatively to our brains? You know, how do I actually show kindness to myself and talk kindly to myself? You know, this is a really key part. And then finally, how do I help myself? And again, this is about creating a strategy of support. And we're going to go through some of those hints and techniques that perhaps you could use that would actually support that self-compassion. So we are going to go through that as well. Has anybody got any questions as far as that's concerned? What I've just gone through. No? Okay. Okay, so I wanted to start with this. So you're on an aeroplane and the oxygen masks come down. What do you do? Put it on. Yeah, they say to you, put it on, don't they? Put it on yourselves before helping everybody else. Okay, so what if some oxygen masks don't come down? There isn't enough oxygen mask to come for everybody. What happens then? What would you do? Ask for help. That's a good one. Ring a bell. Anything else? What I tend to find when I'm going through this is that people will start to say, panic, yes, definitely, that they'll start to work it out as to who would have the oxygen mask and who would use the oxygen masks and start to take on board, who is sat in front of them, who needs it more, how are you actually going to work out sharing those oxygen masks. But the problem is, you as a manager and a leader, it can feel really overwhelming, can't it? When everybody's coming to you with a problem or an issue, all of a sudden you are feeling very overwhelmed by everybody coming to you for help and support. And it's recognizing sometimes that you can't help everybody. And sometimes you have to say, enough. I can't deal with everybody and I can't help everybody. And sometimes that's really difficult. And the reason why it's difficult is because of this. I don't know if anybody's heard of the Cartman drama triangle, but there is a huge amount of drama and this constant whirlwind within social care, isn't there? And a lot of people who work in health and social care are rescuers because they want to rescue people because they are naturally caring. And the problem is, it can be over helpful. It can quite often feel self-sacrificing. And quite often it is because people need to be needed. But when you are constantly having to navigate persecutors who can be quite aggressive, they can be judgmental, or the victims who are downtrodden and helpless and complains about unmet needs, and you're continuing to be the rescuer in the situations because you feel that you are the only person where the buck stops, then that's not a nice place to be. So what I would encourage you, and certainly something that we do within the Institute, is actually give you the skills and strategies that would enable you to actually make other people responsible and accountable for their roles. So there's a real way to navigate away from that and really say to people, say to your team, I can't take all of this on. But it is up to you to be able to say that confidently and with confidence. So that's the Cartman triangle. So I want to now introduce you because, again, this is really important when it comes to overwhelm and managing the stress and anxiety that is associated with overwhelm. And I'm going to talk about cortisol first of all. So cortisol, it's a great hormone that we have that releases when we need it. If we're about to take on something that's quite threatening, then at this point, we have lots of heightened memory and attention. You've got the increased blood sugar that's enabled to go through our muscles, and this is a fight and flight response. But unfortunately, when you have low levels of cortisol, when there is lots of small levels of stress and you're not dealing with the stress, then that can really be quite a negative response as far as your brain and your anxiety is concerned, and all sorts of negative things can start to happen from a physical perspective. Then you've got adrenaline, and again, adrenaline, fight and flight response. But again, when you've got this adrenaline constantly going through your body, it can then really start to take its toll as far as your mental and physical health. So what I really want to focus on is these happy chemicals, because the happy chemicals are what you really need to start thinking about on a day-to-day basis. You should be thinking every single day, how can I increase my dopamine, my oxytocin, my serotonin, and my endorphins? And this is what I'd really like to focus on for you. So you come away with some clear strategies. You know what, these are, if I do some of what's in here within these happy chemicals, if I could produce that it will actually start to mitigate and take away the cortisol and the adrenaline, which actually makes your brains much happier. The huge part of that within the compassionate leadership is very much around the oxytocin and the serotonin. They are key parts to this. So let's have a look at dopamine first of all. Dopamine is the reward chemical. So we actually have, our brains are very in tune to making sure that we have this reward chemical. So it's things like self-care activities, doing a task, writing a to-do list and ticking off a to-do list actually creates dopamine. Now, how easy would it to be? I mean, I love a to-do list. I've got a to-do list right here and I'm able to tick my to-do list off, cross it out. It's really important. Celebrating little wins, again, it's just, you know, that kind, empathetic voice. If you've done it, celebrate it, say good job to yourself and to members of the team. The next one is oxytocin, and that is the love hormone. So the more that we connect with other people, the more oxytocin that we will release within our brains. And when you think about, and I just want to visualize, when you hug somebody and you rest into that hug and you take a moment to enjoy that hug, just think about what is actually happening in your brain and how does that actually make you feel? Because I can almost feel it just thinking, visualizing a hug with somebody, how much of that oxytocin is released. And that's a hugely soothing and calming. When mothers, when they give birth to children, there is a surge of oxytocin because it is, you know, it's an evolutionary adaptive chemical that we've actually evolved to have. So we actually bond with our offspring. So really important chemical. The next is serotonin. We can all do some of this, and I'm going to go through some of the exercises. So it's meditating, breathing techniques, sunlight, going walking, just spending 5 minutes outside in the morning with the sunlight. Doesn't need to be full sun, but that really, it's almost like a battery charger because it really enables your serotonin to be topped up. So think about those activities that you could do. And then you've got endorphins, and these are the painkillers, and they have actually, because we are endurance, we have been built for endurance, we needed endorphins to actually enable us, because it stops the pain happening within our muscles and our bones. But there are other things that we can do without going on a massive run. So it's laughter, essential oils, watching comedy, dark chocolate, and exercising. So the more that you can do building these happy chemicals into your brain on a day-to-day basis, the less likely you are to experience cortisol and adrenaline in a negative way. Cortisol and adrenaline are good in some instances, but you don't want to be having that for a long period of time. So those are the brain chemicals to introduce you to. So I just wanted to give you an idea of the breathing techniques. And again, when you are feeling overwhelmed, if you can just sit quietly and go through this meditative breathing technique, and you can see step 1 is inhale for 4 seconds through the nose. And when you do breathe, making sure that you're not breathing from the top of your chest. What you're trying to do is get the lungs at the side of your ribs. So the air should come on the outer side of your ribs, because that's a much better breath. So inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, and then exhale for 8 seconds. And if you do that 4 times, you will know that this actually, it's a hugely rebalancing flow within your body. So that's the breathing techniques. The next is mindset. And there's a book called that's written by Carol Dweck called Mindset, and she talks a lot about how having an open mindset can really is very it's a really good thing to have in terms of managing stress and being open, but also things like loving kindness practice. And in the center of this heart, and you will get the slides, but it says, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be peaceful and at ease, may I feel loved and accepted. But also say, may they be happy, may they be healthy, may they be peaceful and at ease, and may they feel loved and accepted. And you do that for everybody, even the people that don't necessarily like. If you do that for everybody, yourself and everybody else, it really does change your mindset. There's a huge raft of evidence again to support the more that we can be kind, it actually allows us our brain to react differently to stress and how interactions as well. So that's breathing techniques and mindset. So we're going to go through and how to build relationships across boundaries now. So again, this is the 4 strands of compassionate leadership from Michael West. So compassionate leadership is definitely the attending is active listening and being present. I think, I just want you to visualize having a one-to-one with your manager or you as a manager, and you're not fully present. So you're thinking about the things that you've got to do. They're thinking about things that they've got to do. They've got phones on the desk and they're looking at the phones. It is really important to be present, to be completely present with the other person if you want to really implement compassionate leadership. Understanding, meet the other person where they are at. Make sure that there are no assumptions, and it's hard for us not to assume, but no assumptions and no judgments about the other person. Just meet them where they're at. Walk in their shoes. Really try and understand, okay, what does it feel like to be that person? What do you actually know about their situation? Can you actually put yourself in their shoes? And helping is giving people the strategies, or at least thinking about, okay, well, if this person comes to me with support, what can I actually help them with? Not for you to help them with, but what can you signpost? What things can you signpost to them? So having that helping element to it. So I'm just going to quickly go through. It's really important to know who you are as a person, but also who you have within your teams, or whether you're working across boundaries. We meet all types of people along the way, don't we? Health and social care is full of very different people to ourselves. So how do we actually manage that? And how can we actually understand each other a little bit better? So this is Nigel Risner's The Zookeeper, and you can see I've got up here is extroverts and fast-paced, introverts and slow-paced here, and then on the left we've got task-focused, and on the right we've got people-focused. So let's go through them. Now this is to do with psychometrics and traits. Now traits are very different to personality. Personality can be changed and adapted, but when you're talking about traits, these are very much who we are when we are born. We inherit some traits from our parents. It doesn't mean to say that we can't do something about it, but they are traits nonetheless. Extroversion and introversion are actually evolutionary adaptive functions that we've developed over time. So a lion as a person, they are the people that have a very strong presence when they walk through the room, in the room. You know where they are. They're quite loud, perhaps. They're very fast-paced. They are extroverts. And they are strategic in their thinking. So they're really good on the strategy. They can think about a situation and can really very quickly start to pinpoint the bits that need to be fixed and really develop that strategy quite quickly. Really good in a team, you know, that's having to go through some changes. They can navigate those changes quite quickly and create plans. Perhaps what they're not so good at is listening and perhaps lack some empathy. Not all, because we do come across empathetic clients, but just be mindful that sometimes they might not be as good as listeners as other people, other animals that we've got here. So then we've got the monkey. So again, they are extroverts. These are the party people, the life and soul of the parties. They love people and they are very creative. They like to be involved in lots of different tasks, lots of different projects. What they might not be so good at is completing everything. So they're good at really starting something, but not perhaps good at finishing stuff. But they're really lovely people to have around because they're full of energy. Then you've got the dolphins, and the dolphins are the harmonizers. They are introverts. They can be creative too. So they love team harmony, real team players. But perhaps what they might shy away from is conflict because they don't like to upset people. Doesn't mean to say that they can't have it. And if they are given the skills and the knowledge to do that, they are excellent communicators. So when they deliver a conflict message, it is done with empathy and compassion, but they do need to be given the skills to be able to do that. And then we have the elephants, and they are, again, introverts and slow paced. They are opposite to the monkeys. They absolutely love the detail and really good at the detail. So give them Excel spreadsheets to work on, and they're very, very happy. But perhaps might not really sit well with elephants is lots of change going on. So they don't like to change things a lot of the time. So I want you to, first of all, I want you to think about who you are and which animal you resonate with the most. Anybody would like to share who they resonate with the most? I'm going to hold my hand up. I am a dolphin. Anybody would like to share who they are? You can put in the chat if you like. And why is this so important when we're talking about overwhelm? To Caitlin. So when we're building relationships, how on earth do we work out how to talk to one another if we are so different? Yeah, this is a key challenge because we have to see others' perspectives if we are going to truly communicate and collaborate with one another. So we're going to move on from here. Thank you for sharing that. And how we do that the most effective way, thank you, Leah, is by values, really understanding, because values act as your moral compass. If you have really strong values as a person that you can share with your team and perhaps create some team values, it can really start to bring the team together into one sense of purpose. So I would really be interested to know, does anybody here today have a list of, use the values in every single part of their business? So it runs like a golden thread. Your values run like a golden thread through your business, through your team, that actually supports appraisals, one-to-ones, recruitment process, the decisions you make as a team. Does anybody have that? Lovely. Thank you, Christine. Very good values. Because when you have the values, then you call upon the values when you have to have any sort of conflict conversation or you're trying to build those relationships. It's a really good indicator of who you are as a person, as an organization. And I'm going to tell you why it's so important now. So you can see we've got two cavemen here, and this is, it's actually come from Amy Cuddy, who is an American psychologist, and she talks about trust and respect. And the reason why trust and respect is so important is because at the back part of our brain, the primal part of our brain, when we meet somebody for the first time, we ask two questions. And those two questions are, do I trust you? Do I trust this person not to do me harm? So is this person not going to kill me? Because again, this is going back to caveman times. The next one is, do I respect you? And the reason why we ask that question in the back of our brains is because if we ask, do I respect you? We are actually asking, can this person provide me with the skills and knowledge that would enable me to survive better? So really important to have those embedded within your values. And there's a link there to Connect Then Lead, which is which actually is a study of 50,000 people within this study. Because the problem that we have is that we are often told that we don't need to be liked in order to be an effective leader. But this actually completely goes against that. And it says with this 50,000 people, you've only got a 1 in 2,000 chance of being an effective leader whilst demonstrating non-trust characteristics. So when you think about recruitment and you think about the jobs that are going out there, it is all around skills, knowledge, and experience. And I know the care sector, the social care, does actually really focus much more on the values, on the values-based leadership. But we have to have the values-based leadership really allows you to build trust. So really key point there, trust and respect, building your values and making sure that you've got those values. You talk about those values when you're trying to build relationships, because hopefully you've got things like compassionate and caring. Those are trust values. They're the ones that will really connect people to who you are and what you're trying to achieve. So then there's a lovely quote. It's Abraham Lincoln. Apparently, not much evidence of this, but we know we're going to use it as Abraham Lincoln. And he says, I don't like that man. I must get to know him better. And I think that's a really interesting quote because, again, this is from Michael West, Compassionate Leadership. It says, who among we lead do we find it easier or more difficult to interact with? Really good question, isn't it? Who among we lead do we find it easier or more difficult to interact with? And we tend to interact better with the people who are like us. So how on earth can you connect with people that perhaps aren't like you? How do you actually build those relationships? And to what extent do we practice being present with those that we find more difficult? Because again, this is about building the confidence to go and build those relationships with people from a compassionate point of view, to help and support you. What is the purpose of building relationships? To support you with your overwhelm. Well, you actually want to build your tribe. You want people to support you when you're not there and speak about you positively when you're not in the room. And that's a really key point for building those relationships. They will help you to manage the overwhelm if they're supporting you. And again, I love this. This is the curiosity curve. When you're building relationships, quite often when you're having, there is all sorts of difficult conversations that you're having on a day-to-day basis. That could be with a family member. It could be with a professional that you're trying to deal with. And quite often, you can start they can be difficult conversations, and that just in itself can lead to overwhelm. If you feel that you're having to have this difficult conversation, it's not a nice place to be. And this is why it's so important to be curious and open. And the curiosity curve really goes through that. So you can see the curve here. You've got self-righteous disdain, confident dismissal, skeptical tolerance on the zones of certainty. And then the zones of curiosity is cautious openness, genuine interest, and fascinated wonder. So if you're going into a meeting with somebody within your team or a connection, and you are thinking, they're mistaken, incompetent, and out of line, I'm right, how can you actually move the curiosity curve a little bit to perhaps, I think they're wrong, but I'll hear them out? Is that a real way forward for you? Because I think if you do that, that really opens up so much, and it will help you build those connections and those relationships that will enable you to have those difficult conversations much more freely and easily, and without that conflict, that awful feeling that you're having that conflict conversation. Anybody got any questions? Thoughts, observations? Anybody gone through that? Okay. So yes, we deal with all types of people, don't we? Across health and social care. If you're feeling anxious about having a conversation, thanks, Kat. If you're dreading having a conversation with a GP, with a social worker, with somebody, a family member, it's really making sure that when you're having these conversations and using that curiosity curve to build those relationships, going into those conversations. And as I mentioned earlier, it's so important because they can then, what you want to do is for them to defend you in a room when you're not there. And they will only do that if they trust and respect you. They understand who you are as a person. You've built those relationships. So it's really, really key to have that fully functioning relationship, trust and respect relationship as part of leading teams across boundaries. And what you're aiming for, there's The Power of the Other by Henry Cloud, and I'll just go through them. The corner one is the no connection. And this is where it goes back to the Abraham Lincoln quote, where, I don't know that man, I must get to know him better. Having the no connection is you really need to build that connection. You really need to go and have those conversations with the people that you don't naturally connect with. The corner two is the bad connection, and that's the toxic connection. And what you don't want to be doing is enabling that relationship. You want to get or make sure that bad connection is either exited out of the business or you do something about it. Because as long as you've been open and curious, but if it's still a bad connection, what are you actually going to do that would help you not to deal with that bad connection any longer? The corner three is the fake connection, and this is where we see the most difficulties, because what happens is that you just know when somebody is being fake with you or not, and you'll know it because you're having these conversations with them and you think everything, they're saying and doing all the right things, but you actually feel that they might be saying things that are not part of the conversation that you've been having when you are not there. So I would absolutely make sure that you're having those conversations with the fake connection, saying, you know what, I just don't feel that we're on the same page here, or, I just don't feel that we're truly connected, and start to really work on that building that relationship. What you really want is that real connection where they trust you, you have their back, they have your back, and that's what you're aiming for, is that real connection. So I'm going to go on to building your tribe now and how you actually go about doing that. Has anybody got anything specific that you've come on this call today? You know, this was about building relationships. And really, have you understood why you're building the relationship, what the purpose or the objective is? Have you actually made a plan as to how you will actually achieve that? And, you know, will you make a plan, and how will you actually measure that outcome? Anybody gone through that? Because you're attending this session, as I say, today on building relationships. Anybody gone through that process? And how did it go, Kat? Be good to know. Okay, that's good. Super. Anybody in a situation where you really want to manage, you really want to build a relationship at the moment across the boundaries, that you're struggling with to build those relationships at the moment? You've got a GP, health visitor, district nurse, social worker, pharmacy, families. Particularly difficult, that's causing problems within the team. It is an interactive session, hopefully. It's really important to map this out. Okay, trying to build. Now that's a really interesting one. So you're trying to build relationships with, and am I right to assume that some get on better than others with each other? Would that be
Yes, yeah, some do.
accurate? Okay.
And some don't want to get on with each other, it appears.
Yeah. And it's a really difficult situation, and it's one that we find ourselves in all the time. And the only way that, I mean, for me, it is using the compassionate leadership framework, it's using the values, you know, how do they actually, do they understand the reasons why they all need to get on? This is a really, because I again, it's thinking about them understanding what you want to achieve, that you want people to be supportive of one another. You want everybody to come in with mutual support and respect. And if you don't have that, then it's a case of exiting some people out of the business if they don't belong, which is a tough one. I know somebody had the hand up before. Was it you, Dee, that had? Anybody else? Yeah.
Leah's popped in the chat as well. Family relationships always ongoing.
Yeah. And there's a really, I don't know if anybody uses the circle of influence, circle of concern, and circle of control for managing relationships. the number of strategies that we actually cover within a lot of our accredited leadership. Leah, would you like to expand on that? Is there anything you want specific help with or advice on?
I've mentioned family because it's just ongoing. You get cycle families coming in, and it's some are for short time, so it's harder to build any form of relationship with them. And some of them are just not open to build that. So it's just a ongoing thing that you get in care home.
Yeah. It's such, you know, you really need to think about what do you want to achieve for your teams, for, you know, internal teams, but also what do you want to achieve within external teams? Okay, power imbalance or hierarchy. Are you talking about when you have to manage up, or, you know, that again is what can you control and what can you influence? What can't you control of that power imbalance? What can't you control? What absolutely you can't control? What can you control is your thoughts, your attitudes, your responses, the way that you approach it, all the things that you can control. And there may be things that you can influence, like other team members. Perhaps that be something, is the fact that you could create some evidence around whatever it is that you're trying to achieve and actually pitch that evidence to them. And is it something that you can resolve? Is it something that is actually, you know, is it something that you can actually affect? Because if it isn't, is that a situation where you think to yourself, you know what, I can't be here? And I don't know the answer to that, but there's some real honest conversations, isn't there? Because when it's a power imbalance, that sounds to me that's quite a negative. As managing up, and believe you me, I've experienced it, and it's not a nice situation to be in. Yeah, and you know why this is, and again, you've got the ability to attend all our accredited programs. We run these types of sessions that perhaps we haven't gone into the detail because we're covering both building relationships and overwhelm. But managing those relationships, we've got specific how-to sessions on that as well. You know, building those relationships is a real important point, but having those conversations to confidently go into a situation where you're having a meeting with somebody, and if you do it from a compassionate point of view, where you've gone in being open and honest, and you honestly say, I just need to talk to you openly about something, if that's okay. Really thinking about your body language, your tone of voice, how you're actually going to approach it, making sure that you're doing it for you and your well-being sometimes, you know, because you don't want to be in a situation where you are feeling so stressed about something that it's actually making you quite poorly from a mental health perspective and physical as well. So I've just left an exercise. There's things that you can do, absolutely, is to connect emotionally, which I've sort of just been going through, self-awareness. Definitely try and find that common ground and use that compassionate style of attend, understanding, empathy, and help. And sometimes it's hard to be kind. You know, there's a great quote, it's hard to be kind and clever. because sometimes we don't always feel like being kind, especially when people have done wrong to us. But if we have to start from that compassionate perspective, because only then can you start to open other people's minds. And definitely, you know, the basic principles is being authentic, open, honest, making sure that you are acting with humility and vulnerability and optimism as well. And always compassion. So this is just an exercise that I was going to leave you with. So, you know, you're a manager and you can either be building relationships within the health and social care professionals, or you can building relationships within your teams. You can choose either one, but really want you to reflect on writing down what your objective would be. How will you actually build rapport with somebody, and what language would you use? And I think if you can start to reflect on that as an exercise, then it will just help you to understand how you're actually going to position that as a, you know, an exercise that you could actually do.